After 10 years of saving every penny and working endless side jobs, I finally turned my dream into reality, opening my own company. On the grand opening day, I had sent invitations to my entire family weeks in advance, hoping for that moment when they would walk in and say, "We're proud of you." But that evening, as the office lights glowed and guests slowly left one by one, I realized not a single member of my family had shown up. Instead, they were all gathered at my younger sister's lavish housewarming party. And just as I was quietly folding chairs in the empty room, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "We need to talk about profits. Your sister says she deserves a cut." For the first time, I replied without hesitation. "This company isn't a family ATM. Have you ever been hurt by your own family like that? Where are you listening to this story from? I want to see your thoughts in the comments so I'll know I'm not alone. Thank you so much." My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. That day was the grand opening of my green interior design startup. I wore a simple blue dress I had saved up to buy, not expensive, not luxurious, but it made me feel worthy of the moment. The small office on the third floor glowed with lights. A white banner hung across the wall with the words "Parker Green Interiors, Grand Opening." I had prepared a cake, glasses of wine, and a few appetizers. Everything was modest yet carefully arranged, just enough to create a warm atmosphere. Guests arrived early. Some were old friends from college, others were former colleagues, and even a few people who would later become my very first partners, a boutique hotel owner and a construction contractor. They shook my hand, congratulated me, raised their glasses, and told me that opening a business in Seattle wasn't easy, that I was truly brave. I smiled, thanked them, proud yet nervous. But through it all, my eyes kept drifting toward the door. I had sent invitations to my family weeks before, both printed cards and emails reminding them again and again in our group chat so no one could ever say they didn't know. I had pictured my parents walking in with smiles, my sister Chloe hugging me tightly. A family photo on the day I launched my business. I had longed for that moment more than anything. But then 7 o'clock came and went, the noise faded, and the guests began to leave. The office turned empty again. I stood in the middle of the brightly lit room, holding a half-finished glass of wine, staring at trays of untouched cake and rows of chairs no one had sat in. The silence made it hard to breathe. All evening I had tried to look busy, smiling brightly, but the moment that final door closed, disappointment crashed over me like a wave. This was the day I had dreamed of for 10 years, yet when the most important moment arrived, I was completely alone. By 8 o'clock, I started cleaning up. As I bent down to gather plates, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, and my heart sank. In the family group chat, my mother had just sent a new picture. Everyone gathered in the spacious kitchen in Portland, glasses of red wine raised high, all of them laughing. A banner on the wall read, "Housewarming Party, Chloe and Michael." They were together, celebrating my sister's new house. Not a single mention of my grand opening. Not a word of apology. As if my event had never even existed. I gripped my phone tightly and forced myself to keep clearing the tables. But less than a minute later, the screen lit up again. A private message from my mother. "We need to talk about profits. Your sister says she deserves a cut." My hands trembled so badly I had to set the stack of plates down before I dropped them. It felt as if 10 years of hard work had been reduced, in their eyes, to nothing more than an open wallet. I looked up, and the room suddenly felt colder than ever. I didn't reply to that message. The grand opening night ended without the embrace of family, without a single group photo, leaving only me, a woman in a blue dress, quietly stacking chairs in the lit-up office, feeling both sorrowful and resolute. From that moment on, I knew my path would no longer be tied to fragile hopes of their recognition. I sat down on the one chair left after the event, the yellow ceiling light casting long shadows across the white wall, and my heart felt unbearably heavy. And as always, in the loneliest moments, childhood memories came rushing back, reminding me why I chose this path, the path of carrying burdens, of independence, but also one lined with unhealed wounds. I was born and raised in an ordinary family in the suburbs of Portland. We were never well off. My father worked as an appliance repairman, my mother as a cashier at a supermarket. Both of them worked long shifts. I still remember the afternoons after school when the house was silent, and I had to cook instant noodles or eat cold bread for dinner. By the time I was 13, I was already wiping down tables at a small cafe near school, earning a few spare dollars to buy notebooks. For me, taking care of myself was never a choice, it was simply the way life was. But in complete contrast to me, my younger sister Chloe grew up as a little queen in that very same house. Chloe is 3 years younger than me, and from the start, she was spoiled. I still remember one time when she got a bad grade and skipped school to go to the movies with friends. When the teacher called home, my mother just laughed it off. She's got personality, she'll find her own path. With me, it was different. If I was late with even one assignment, I was scolded immediately. You're the older sister, you have to set an example. Laziness is not allowed. That difference, from such an early age, felt like a quiet cut, one that never stopped repeating itself. My parents always had one phrase ready on their lips. You're the older sister, you have to sacrifice for her. Those words became invisible chains binding me throughout my childhood. When Chloe wanted new shoes, I had to give up my savings. When Chloe wanted to go on a field trip, I stayed home to work extra shifts so my mother wouldn't have to spend too much. Even when I wanted to apply for an art class, my father brushed it off. We don't have money for drawing nonsense. Learn something practical, something that can help the family. So I folded away my dream of holding a paintbrush and quietly took a part-time job at a furniture store. But it was in that very place that I first discovered the world of design, a world that made me believe that one day I would build a career of my own. While I was struggling to scrape together every dollar, Chloe grew up believing that everything would simply fall into her lap. I remember clearly one night during my senior year of high school. I had to work the late shift at a cafe to save money for my SAT fees. Chloe was only 15 then and had just been caught skipping school. I came home, sweat still clinging to me after work, only to hear my mother speaking to her in the sweetest tone. It's okay, just rest, your sister will take care of everything. I froze. In their eyes, my sacrifices were never enough, they were simply expected. When I entered college, I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs. I worked as a barista at Starbucks, waited tables at a restaurant, and there were days when I'd finish an overnight shift only to rush straight into a morning lecture. My body was exhausted, but I never allowed myself to give up. I believed that if I persevered, one day I would finally be recognized not just by society, but by my own family. I wanted them to look at me and say, "Olivia, you did it." But that day never seemed to come. Meanwhile, Chloe dropped out of school halfway and bounced from one thing to another, from selling clothes to taking yoga classes. My parents never scolded her. Instead, they always found ways to cover for her. She's still young, let her explore herself. Then they would turn to me and say, "You're the older sister. You're responsible for staying stable so she can have some freedom." That sentence followed me for years, shifting from a gentle reminder into an unshakable command. And I obeyed, silently. I never said it out loud, but deep in my heart, I always held on to one dream. To be free, to build a career of my own. In America, everything is brutally competitive. If you don't stand firm, you'll be left behind. I understood that better than anyone. But perhaps because I had learned to rely on myself so early, I had also learned to take full responsibility for every choice I made. The only thing I still wished for, even just once, was recognition from my family. A hug, a simple phrase saying they were proud of me, something that seemed so simple, yet felt impossibly out of reach. Those childhood memories kept flooding back on that empty grand opening night. I saw myself again, a skinny little girl working in a cafe, a student juggling classes and overnight shifts, an older sister who shouldered every responsibility so her younger sister could live her so-called spirited life. I understood why I could stand in a brightly lit office that day, but I also understood why those empty chairs at my launch cut so deeply. It was because I had hoped that after all the years of sacrifice, they would finally show up. And once again, just like so many times before in the very house I used to call home, I was left alone. That night, I barely slept. I lay on the small bed in my rented apartment in Capitol Hill, eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind spinning with one question: why didn't they come? I had waited for a nod, a proud glance from my parents, but instead I got a photo of the whole family raising glasses in Chloe's new apartment. And worse, a cold text from my mother as if my existence, my effort, only mattered when it could be measured in money. I tossed and turned until morning, feeling both hollow and furious. Yet deep down, I still whispered to myself, maybe they were just thoughtless, maybe everything would be okay. I wanted to believe that, at least in that fragile moment. The next morning, my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering, my voice still hoarse from lack of sleep. "Olivia, do you have a moment to talk about yesterday?" For a brief second, I thought she was going to apologize, maybe explain that something unexpected had come up and that was why no one had made it. But her next words left me stunned. "Chloe feels she inspired you. You know, she always encouraged you to follow your passion, so she thinks she should have a share in the company." I went numb, unable to form a response. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my chest while my mind went blank. My company had only just opened its doors. I hadn't signed a single contract, hadn't made a single dollar in profit, yet my mother was already talking about splitting shares with Chloe, the very person who hadn't even shown up to support me on the most important day of my life. Before I could react, my father's voice cut in. Deep, steady, and firm through the speakerphone. "Olivia, you're single, you don't have children, so you don't need that much. You can share a portion with the family. Family is supposed to help each other." I shot upright in bed, my hand gripping the edge of the sheets so tightly my knuckles ached. I had grown used to hearing words like that all my life, but today, in this moment, they felt like a knife plunging straight into my chest. I had been waiting for praise, for some recognition. But all I received was a demand to carve up the fruit of my labor before it had even ripened. I tried to keep my voice calm. "The company hasn't even made a profit yet. How can I share any stake? This is 10 years of my work, every dollar saved, every sleepless night. Chloe hasn't contributed anything." There was a pause on the other end, then my mother sighed. "You're always so negative. Family is about sharing, not calculating gains and losses. Your sister doesn't have the stability you do. She needs something to lean on. Helping her is helping this family too." I swallowed hard. The way my mother spoke made sacrifice sound like my default duty, while the benefits automatically belonged to Chloe. When I hung up, my chest felt heavy, but a wave of indescribable anger also rose inside me. For years, every time Chloe was unemployed, I was the one sending her money. I had paid off her piled-up credit card debt after her shopping sprees. I had transferred money to my mother to cover Chloe's tuition whenever she tried yet another course she never finished. No one ever mentioned those times. No one ever called it a contribution. All of it was forgotten, as if that responsibility naturally belonged to me. And now, even the company I built with my own sweat and tears, they wanted to pull me back into the endless cycle of sacrifice. I remembered an incident not too long ago. Chloe had gone through nearly half a year of unemployment. She spent recklessly until the bank sent her a debt warning. At that time, I had just received a small bonus from my old job, money I had planned to save for my startup. But when my mother called me in tears saying, "Chloe is in such trouble, please help her just this once more," I transferred the entire bonus to bail her out. Chloe never thanked me, and my parents never mentioned it again. Instead, a few months later, when I couldn't keep supporting her, my mother scolded me. "How can you be so calculating with your own sister?" Those wounds piled up over the years, and today, when I heard the absurd demand for company shares, I finally realized, in their eyes, I wasn't a daughter, not an individual with dreams or limits, but just a wallet, a default source of money. That night, I sat in my new office, staring at the stack of company documents on the desk. The neon light reflected against the company logo I had designed, a green leaf rising from a white background. I touched it, feeling both pride and pain. I had created this, but in my family's eyes, it was nothing more than a gold mine for them to exploit. Tears fell not out of sadness, but because the truth was now too clear. I had always hoped they would see me as a person, yet it turned out they only saw me as a tool. And for the first time in my life, I began to think about setting boundaries to protect myself, something I had never had the courage to do in 32 years. After a long night of tossing and turning over their unreasonable demands, I knew I couldn't keep going the way I had. For 10 years, I had lived as the one who carries it all, ready to open my wallet whenever my family needed, as if it were my natural duty. But now, when the company had only just opened and they were already trying to carve it up, I realized that if I didn't set boundaries right away, everything I had built would soon turn to ashes. I stared at my bank account on my laptop screen, where rows of automatic payments were still listed. The utilities for my parents' house in Portland, the health insurance I had been quietly paying for my sister every month, and the credit card payments from Chloe's overspending. Each number on that screen felt like another scratch across my heart. I asked myself, how long have I been living for them, forgetting that I also deserve to live for myself? I opened the payment management page, took a deep breath, and clicked cancel one by one. First, the utilities for my parents' house. Next, Chloe's insurance. Then, the credit card installments. With each click, my hands trembled, but a strange lightness rose in my chest, as if invisible ropes were finally being unfastened from my shoulders. Yet that lightness quickly gave way to unease. I knew sooner or later my mother would find out, and when she did, the storm of her anger would come. Sure enough, just a few days later, my phone rang. It was my mother's familiar number. The moment I answered, her voice came sharp with reproach. Olivia, why haven't the payments gone through this month? The bills are piling up, and Chloe is getting debt collection calls. What are you doing cutting everything off like this? Family is about sharing. Since when did you become so selfish? I sat silently by the office window, watching the heavy Seattle rain streak down the street, feeling both hurt and angry. My mother had never once asked if I was okay, never once asked if my company was surviving, but the instant the money stopped, she called to scold me. I bit my lip as memories echoed through my mind. The time I gave up my first quarterly bonus to pay for Chloe's tuition. The time I canceled my only planned vacation to send money home to fix the roof. The time I worked myself to exhaustion just to make sure their bills weren't late. And now, because I stopped, they called me selfish. My throat tightened, but this time, instead of silently enduring, I spoke up slowly but firmly. I need to protect myself too. I can't keep sacrificing like this. This is my company, my future. If I keep carrying everything, when will I ever get to live my own life? There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. I could almost hear my mother's quickened breathing. Then she let out a bitter laugh. Protect yourself? You're always thinking about yourself. This family survives because everyone sacrifices. How can you change so much? I closed my eyes, tears pooling at the corners. I wanted to scream that I had been the one sacrificing the most, that without me Chloe would have defaulted long ago. That it was this endless sacrifice that had worn me down. But I knew no matter how I said it, they wouldn't understand. To them, I was just the older sister who must carry the load. And perhaps, for the first time in my life, I accepted that I couldn't change how they saw me. The only thing I could change was how I protected myself. After that call, I turned off my phone and sat motionless by the window for a long time. The rain outside kept pouring, but inside me, a small fire had begun to burn. It wasn't bright, but it was steady. I realized that love cannot flow from only one side, and sharing cannot be an excuse for exploitation. I had crossed an important boundary. From now on, I would no longer be their walking wallet. I would pour what I had into my dreams, my company, and the people who truly respected my effort. For the first time, I saw my future clearly. I knew that this act of ending my compliance would anger my family, might even push me farther away from them. But I also knew that if I didn't start today, I would never escape the endless cycle of sacrifice. I whispered softly to myself, like a promise. I deserve protection too. And this time, I truly believed I was worthy of it. In the days after I cut off the payments to my family, my office began to hum with new life. My two new partners and I were mapping out our first project, a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. I threw myself completely into the work, as if trying to fill the space my family had left behind. But life, as always, never lets you stay in calm waters for long. One Monday morning, just as I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, a bright red notification flashed across the screen. Warning: suspicious login attempt detected. My heart clenched. I clicked for details and saw that someone had tried to log into my company's internal financial account 3 times in a row, all unsuccessful. I expanded the information, and immediately my pulse quickened. The IP address didn't trace back to some unfamiliar city. It came straight from Portland, the very place where my parents lived. I sat frozen for a few seconds, my hands ice cold. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was coincidence, I told myself. But deep inside, a terrible suspicion took root. I dug deeper, checking the timestamps and the type of device used. The data was unmistakable. It was a regular home computer, connected from the neighborhood where my parents lived. I inhaled sharply, clenching my fists tight. After everything I had done, after finally setting boundaries, were they now trying to reach directly into my company? I called my mother, anger boiling inside me like never before. The phone rang a few times before she answered, her familiar voice calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. I didn't waste time circling around. Mom, did someone at the house try to log into my company's system? I just got a security alert. On the other end, there was a brief silence, then she let out a dry laugh. Oh, that was me. I just wanted to take a quick look. I only wanted to see how your business was doing, nothing serious. All those numbers looked complicated, so I thought I'd check them for you, help manage the finances for you. Hearing that, rage rose in my throat. My voice trembled, but every word burst out from my chest. No one has the right to touch my company. Not you, not Dad, not Chloe. This is 10 years of my work. If it happens again, I will take legal action. I heard my mother suck in a sharp breath before snapping back. Are you threatening your own mother? When did you change so much? You think just because you're successful now, you don't need family anymore? I bit my lip, tears welling in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. My reply was firm. No, I need family. But I need a family that respects me, not one that invades me. I hung up before she could say another word, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. That night, I sat alone in the office. The laptop screen still displayed the failed login warning. I stared at it, feeling as though the entire world I had been building was under threat. This was no longer just about sharing. It was a clear sign of attempted takeover. If I didn't defend what I had with everything in me, it would all be ripped from my hands, just like the countless times before when I had let them take my time, my money, my dreams. But this time, I swore I wouldn't let it happen again. I opened the management system and began changing every password tied to the company. Bank accounts, accounting software, project management platforms. I activated two-factor authentication, storing everything securely on a separate device. Each action felt like building a new wall around the fruits of my labor. When I finally finished, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply, though my chest still ached. I had never imagined I would one day have to defend myself against my own family. Outside, Seattle was sinking into the night, the city lights reflecting against the glass window. I saw my own reflection staring back at me, eyes red but burning with determination. I whispered, as if to myself, "No one has the right to take this. No one." And in that moment, I knew it with absolute clarity. The conflict had escalated, and the road ahead would no longer be about pleading for them to understand me. It would be a battle to protect myself, to protect my dream. After discovering someone had tried to break into my company's system, I had become more cautious than ever. I changed my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, even installed new security cameras in the office. I thought that would be enough to keep my space safe. But I was wrong. I never imagined the person I needed to guard against most would be my own sister. That afternoon, when I returned to the office after meeting a client, I noticed the glass door slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat because I was certain I had been the last to leave and had locked it carefully. I hurried inside, the sound of my heels striking the wooden floor sharpening the tension in the air. And then, I froze at the sight before me. Chloe, my sister, was standing in the middle of my office, dressed in a fashionable dress, holding up her phone to record a video. Beside her was her new boyfriend, a sharply dressed man leaning casually on the back of my office chair as if it were his own. Chloe's voice rang out loudly into the camera, brimming with confidence. "This is our family company. Everything here belongs to the Parker family. I'm so proud to share it with everyone." I was stunned. Every word out of her mouth felt like a knife twisting into my chest. I walked straight toward her, my voice shaking with anger. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" Both of them turned. For a split second, Chloe looked startled, but almost immediately she regained her confidence, smirking. "Oh, you're back? I was just recording a little something. This is the family company, after all. It's not just yours." I looked around, the design drafts, the contract files, even the company logo displayed on the big screen, everything was being turned into props for her performance. I stepped closer, my voice sharp as ice. "This isn't a place for you to parade around. You have no right to be here, and absolutely no right to call this a family company." Chloe lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with defiance. "If it's not family, then whose is it? Did you forget? Mom and Dad said you have to share. I have rights too. Wasn't I always your inspiration?" My fists clenched, the surge of anger nearly spilling over. Memories of every sacrifice I had made, of every time I had been treated like a wallet instead of a daughter, came rushing back all at once. And now, right here in my own office, my sister was standing there, boldly declaring ownership. I drew a deep breath and spoke each word slowly, coldly, so cold that even I barely recognized my own voice. "You have no rights here. This company is mine. I am the only legal owner, the one who spent 10 years building it from nothing. If you step in here again without permission, I will call the police." I saw Chloe's face freeze instantly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her boyfriend even stepped back, suddenly unsure. Neither of them had ever imagined that I, the older sister who had always bowed my head, would dare to draw such a clear and final line. For a few seconds, the room was drowned in silence, the only sound the pounding of my own heartbeat in my chest. Then Chloe suddenly screamed, her voice breaking. "You're cruel. You won't even give in to your own sister? You'll regret this." She spun around and ran out the door, her heels hammering against the hallway floor. As she fled, I heard her sobbing into her phone, her voice echoing back. "Mom, she kicked me out of the company. She said she'd call the police on me." I stood there in the middle of my office, my hands still trembling, but this time, not from fear. It was from a new strength rising inside me. I turned and looked around the room. The posters, the design samples pinned to the whiteboard, the colorful sketches spread across the table. All of it was mine, the result of 10 years of sweat and sacrifice. I realized then that this was no longer just a family argument. This was the line between keeping my dream alive or letting it be devoured by their unreasonable demands. And this time, I had truly grown. I sat down in my chair and took a long, steady breath to calm myself. Outside, the Seattle rain was still falling lightly. I watched the drops sliding down the window pane and whispered words I hadn't dared to say in years. I am no longer the obedient daughter, always ready to sacrifice. I am Olivia Parker, and I will protect my own dream. My heart was still racing, but along with it came pride, a pride deeper and sharper than anything I had ever felt before. And I knew, in that very moment, that this was the turning point, the moment I finally stepped out of the shadow of family control to become a woman truly free. After that face-to-face confrontation with Chloe, my entire body felt drained. But alongside the exhaustion was a completely different feeling: liberation. For the first time, I didn't retreat. I didn't swallow the pain in silence. I had spoken out, drawn a clear line, and when the office door closed behind her, I knew that from this moment on, my path would no longer be weighed down by endless arguments about sisterly duty or family obligation. I had to learn to channel every ounce of my energy into what truly mattered: myself and the work I had spent 10 years building. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The Seattle sunlight streamed through the large glass window, reflecting across the unfinished interior design sketches scattered on the table. I poured myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began drafting a to-do list. There was no longer room for accusatory messages or pressuring phone calls. I muted the family group chat, leaving them to talk amongst themselves. The office was quiet, filled only with the rhythm of keystrokes and the scratch of my pen on paper. For the first time, I felt like I was truly living for myself. A few weeks later, the moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. My company signed its very first contract. It was with a small boutique hotel in Capitol Hill whose owner wanted to completely renovate the interiors with a green, sustainable style. When I signed my name on that contract, my hand trembled with emotion. I remembered so vividly the moment I had left that cafe as a student, daring only to daydream about one day having an interior design company of my own. And now, that dream had come true. I walked out of the meeting room with a quiet smile, knowing that all those years of effort were finally beginning to bear fruit. To carry out the project, I hired 3 new employees, young, passionate people full of energy. Each of them brought a different piece to the puzzle. Emma, a young designer bursting with creativity. Daniel, a construction engineer with an eye fixed on every technical detail. And Maya, an eager intern always ready to learn and put in extra hours. The office that had once been only me now buzzed with life. The chatter, the laughter, the constant rhythm of keyboards filled the space, making Parker Green Interiors feel more alive than ever. I still remember the feeling during our very first team meeting. As I looked around the room, it suddenly struck me: this was the family I had always dreamed of. Not because we shared blood, but because we shared the same vision, the same determination to bring it to life. I saw the way they looked at me: with respect, with trust. No one here saw me as a wallet or a tool. They saw me as a leader, as someone to walk beside them. In the days that followed, the work swept me along like a strong current. Together, we visited the hotel, measuring each room, debating every small detail of light, color, and material. I remember one evening when the whole team stayed in the office until 10 o'clock at night, eating pizza off the work table, sketching ideas while laughing at silly stories. In that moment, I realized I hadn't felt this happy in years. Happiness didn't come from being recognized by my own family, it came from the genuine sense of belonging with people who truly valued me. Of course, my family never stopped calling, texting, and blaming me. Some days, my mother left as many as 10 missed calls, her voicemails filled with reproachful words. "You've changed. You let work consume you and forgot about your family. You're so selfish, Olivia." I listened, but I no longer trembled the way I once did. I simply turned off the phone and went back to the unfinished sketches on my desk. I was learning how to stop chasing after recognition I knew I would never receive. And the moment I stopped running after it, I felt a space open up inside me, like a door finally unlatched, giving me the freedom to step into a true journey of growth. That weekend, just as the company was beginning to settle into rhythm, I unexpectedly received a call from my father. His voice was low and stern. "Olivia, come home this weekend. Your mother and I have something important to discuss." I hesitated. After everything that had happened, the thought of returning to that old house weighed heavily on me. But I also knew this confrontation would have to come sooner or later. I agreed, telling myself I would walk in with clarity, speak my mind, and not allow myself to be swayed. On Sunday afternoon, I drove back to Portland. My parents' old house looked just as I remembered: beige brick walls, a weathered tiled roof, but inside it was lit brightly and more crowded than usual. I quickly realized it wasn't just my parents and Chloe. A few close relatives were there too: an aunt, an uncle, even the cousin who had always taken Chloe's side. As I stepped in, the whole room fell silent for a beat, and then every pair of eyes turned toward me. In that instant, I understood. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a tribunal, and I was the one on trial. On the long dining table, instead of the usual dishes, I saw a stack of papers neatly placed in front of Chloe. She sat upright, trying to project professionalism, as if she were some seasoned businesswoman. The moment I took my seat, she slid the papers across the table toward me and spoke with practiced seriousness. "I've thought this through carefully. For the company to grow together, I need 15% of the revenue. I'll consider it a fair share for being there for you and inspiring you all this time." I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat, turning into a sharp ache. I glanced over the papers, nothing but vague clauses, without the slightest legal weight. But what hurt me most wasn't the immaturity of those documents. It was the quiet, unspoken agreement in my parents' eyes. They sat on either side of her, not objecting, not saying the demand was absurd. Instead, they looked at me as though waiting for me to yield. I lifted my head and looked straight at my sister, my voice calm but unshakable. "Chloe, this company is the result of 10 years of my work. You didn't put in a single dollar, not a single day of effort. What you call inspiration is not equity. Don't confuse the two." She let out a mocking laugh, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Family is shared. Your company is shared too. Mom and Dad both say so." My father nodded and added, "Olivia, you're on your own. No kids, no big responsibilities. Your sister has a family to think about, a future to plan. What's the harm in giving her 15%? Surely you wouldn't begrudge your own family." I drew in a deep breath and slowly placed the folder I had brought from my bag onto the table. Not a meaningless stack of papers like hers, but full legal documents: the company registration, the business license, the banking records proving I was the sole owner. I pushed it toward the center of the table, my voice ringing out clearly. "These are the legal papers. Parker Green Interiors is registered under my name. I founded it. I run it. There is no partnership, no revenue share, and it is most certainly not a family ATM." The room fell silent. Every eye fixed on the documents as though they were undeniable proof pulling them out of a long, comfortable illusion. Chloe's face turned red, her hands clutching her flimsy stack of papers as she struggled to stay composed, her voice trembling. "You can't be this heartless. Without me, you wouldn't have had the motivation to succeed. I deserve a piece of it." I locked eyes with her, my voice so cold it startled even me. "Motivation is not equity. And you have no right to demand anything here." My mother quickly cut in, her voice edged with anger. "Olivia, you're being too harsh. If family has to talk about legal papers, then what's left of love and kinship?" For the first time in my life, I didn't avert my eyes. I looked straight at her and answered firmly. "Mom, love cannot be built on exploitation. If family only sees me as a wallet, then that kind of kinship means nothing." The entire table froze. A few relatives shook their heads, whispering to each other, but I didn't care enough to listen. My heart was pounding, but with every beat, I felt lighter. For years, I had waited for this moment, the moment I could stand tall and protect my own work against those who had always treated it as if it were theirs by default. Slowly, I stood up, gathered my documents, and let my eyes sweep around the dining table. No one said another word. Chloe's head was bowed, while my parents looked at me with a mix of anger and helplessness. I didn't need to hear any more reproach. I turned, walked straight to the door. With every step, I felt I was leaving behind not just a house, but the invisible chains that had bound me for so many years. Outside, the Portland evening was cool, the wind rushing against me. I took a deep breath, clutching the folder tightly in my hand, and told myself, I am no longer the little girl Olivia. I am a grown woman, and this is my company, my life. I will not look back. And I will never again let anyone turn my hard-earned work into family property. After that tense night at the family dinner table, I drove back to Seattle in silence. The streetlights flashed across my windshield, each golden beam echoing the last words I had left behind. No partnership. No revenue share. No family ATM. I knew that after that night, my family wouldn't let things go so easily. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I saw the result of my defiance not through an angry phone call, but through something far more dangerous. One Monday morning, just after finishing a design team meeting, an unfamiliar email landed in the company inbox. It was from a potential client, signed by the owner of an upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle. He wrote, "We were approached by Chloe Parker from Parker Green Interiors. She said your company is a family business and that she represents you in contract negotiations. Before moving forward, I wanted to confirm with you directly." OS 12. I read the email again and again, my heart aching all over. Chloe. My own sister had used the company's name, claiming to be its representative. I bit my lip, a storm of anger and exhaustion rising inside me. I typed out a short, firm reply, confirming that Parker Green Interiors had one sole legal owner, Olivia Parker, and that all contracts must go through me directly. I attached a copy of the business license along with an apology for the misunderstanding. And as I pressed send, I knew I had just stopped, in time, a move that could have seriously damaged my company's reputation. But that was only the beginning. Within a month, I received 5 more calls and emails, all with the same pattern. We were approached by Chloe Parker. She said she could offer us a special rate because this is a family business. She promised guaranteed quality backed by your company's reputation. Every time, I had to explain, send over legal documents, sometimes even meet in person just to prove the truth. I felt like a guard, standing at the gates of my own company, blocking my sister from turning my hard work into her ticket to deceive others. Gradually, those potential clients began to see the problem. Some responded with sympathy, while others were angry at feeling misled. Through friends in Portland, I heard that Chloe was starting to be shunned in the local business community. Every deal she tried to push through collapsed in the end, because once anyone dug deeper, the truth was undeniable. Chloe had no company, no legal standing, just empty words piggybacking on the name I had built. Meanwhile, my own team and I were entering a new stage. The boutique hotel contract moved forward smoothly, and images of the project began to circulate, drawing attention to my company from other businesses in Seattle. A cafe wanted to redesign its space into a greener environment, a tech startup needed an eco-friendly office layout, even an elementary school in the suburbs reached out for advice on renovating its campus. Within just 6 months, I had signed 3 more contracts, carrying my office from its shaky beginnings into a small but shining presence in Seattle's business community. Some afternoons, I would stand in the office watching my team working with such passion. Emma laughed brightly as she pitched a new idea, Daniel focused intently on fine-tuning the drawings, and Maya hurried off to make coffee for everyone. My heart felt warm. Every smile, every spark of enthusiasm was proof that I had made the right choice, that stepping away from chasing my family's recognition had given me the space I needed to truly grow. From time to time, I still heard bits of news about Chloe. An old friend mentioned that she had tried starting a small business, but it quickly failed because no one trusted her. Sometimes she even posted vague messages on social media, lamenting that she had been betrayed by her own sister. I read them, but they no longer stung the way they once did. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. Relief that the boundary I had drawn was holding firm. I didn't take satisfaction in her failures. I had never wanted her to fall. All I ever wanted was not to be dragged down with her into the same destructive cycle. One evening, after signing a new contract with a tech company, I sat alone in the office, watching Seattle's lights shimmer through the window. I took a sip of coffee and thought to myself, look how far I've come, simply because I chose to stop sacrificing blindly, stop chasing validation in a place where it never existed. And in that moment, I understood that true strength doesn't lie in winning or losing against others, but in having the courage to protect yourself. After everything that had happened with my family, I realized I needed a place to lean on, not financially, but emotionally. So I began joining a small business community group in Seattle. The meetings were held once a month in a cozy cafe in Capitol Hill. There, I met people just like me, small business owners and entrepreneurs who had started from nothing, carrying both their fears and their ambitions. We shared stories about keeping customers, handling financial struggles, even the sleepless nights worrying about how to cover office rent. From those conversations, I made friends with many people. There was Anna, a woman in her 40s who ran a little flower shop, someone who had gone bankrupt once but refused to abandon her dream. There was Marcus, the owner of a secondhand bookstore, who firmly believed that books save people and had kept his shop alive for 10 years. And there were many other faces, each with their own story, yet all sharing the same thread. We respected one another and supported each other with sincerity. Little by little, I realized I didn't feel lonely anymore. At the same time, the atmosphere in the office began to shift. My team became more than just employees, they became true companions. We didn't just work together, we shared pieces of our lives. Some days, Emma brought in homemade pastries for everyone. Daniel told silly stories about the time he miscalculated measurements and had us all laughing, and Maya, the young intern, dashed around with stacks of paper in her arms, smiling endlessly, radiating energy. In those moments, I felt something I had never known in my own family, the warmth of people who genuinely valued me. One late evening, after we had finished the final design for the boutique hotel project, we decided to order pizza to the office. We spread the boxes across the work table, cracked open sodas, and ate while trading jokes. The bright lights lit up the whole room, laughter echoing across the floor. I sat there, looking around at those glowing faces, and felt my heart fill with warmth. Suddenly I realized, this, right here, was home. Not the house I had grown up in, surrounded by demands and unreasonable expectations, but a place where I could breathe freely, where people stayed because they believed I was worth standing beside. I leaned back in my chair, gazing out the window at Seattle's night skyline, glowing like a blanket of golden lights. A smile spread across my face. Family is not just blood. Family is the people who stay, who support you, respect you, and walk beside you. And I knew, at last, I had found my true family. 1 year after that empty grand opening night, my life looked completely different. Parker Green Interiors was no longer just a small office with me and a few sketches pinned to the walls. Now, we had a dedicated team, the original 3 employees still with me, plus 2 new additions. Revenue had become steady, and projects kept coming in from hotels, schools, and local company offices. Every morning when I walked into the brightly lit workspace, hearing the hum of keyboards and the sound of laughter, my heart felt full of peace. This was the reward for 10 years of saving, relentless effort, and the difficult choices I had made to set boundaries for myself. My parents still called from time to time, mostly with casual small talk or short messages. I responded politely, but I kept the connection at arm's length. Gone were the days when I let myself get pulled into phone calls filled with blame or demands for money. I had learned to release those old expectations, to see them simply as relatives I could respect from a distance, but no longer allowed to cross my boundaries. Chloe was almost entirely silent. She rarely appeared on social media, seldom sent messages, and never reached out to me directly. Perhaps she understood, or at the very least, knew that I would never again be the family's walking wallet. One evening, after everyone in the office had gone home, I stayed behind, sitting alone by the window. Seattle glittered outside, the tall buildings glowing with golden light, traffic streaming endlessly below. I sipped my tea, gazing at the sparkling skyline, and thought to myself, I once longed for their recognition. I once craved a hug, a word of praise from my parents. But now, I didn't need it anymore. At first, that realization felt strange, both empty and liberating, but when I looked back at the journey I had taken, I knew this was what true growth felt like. I looked down at the company logo on my laptop and smiled. This company was not an ATM. It was my youth, my 10 years of effort, the freedom I had claimed for myself. No one had the right to touch it but me and the teammates who had built it alongside me. I closed the laptop, the sharp click echoing neatly through the quiet room. Then I stood, took a deep breath, and walked out of the office. Outside, a new road was opening, and this time, I was no longer alone. I had people who truly deserved to sit beside me, people who chose to stay because they saw me, Olivia Parker, as worthy. I smiled, knowing with certainty that from this moment on, I had reclaimed the true value of myself.